Referencing. Why do we need it? Let's face it, it is a bit of a pain in the neck. But it's pretty important. If you want to get good grades, you gotta do it. Sorry. But I totally get it that referencing can be kind of boring and it can be a bit complicated too at times. Don't fret, I've got you covered in today's video. If you are new to this channel, my name is Dr. Hayley Stainton and I am here to help you to achieve the best academic success you can in your course. If that sounds good to you, download my free study guide. The link is down in the description. It will teach you everything you need to know, or most of the things you need to know, in order to maximize your chances of getting those high grades. So you've just started a new course at college or university, or maybe even school, and your lecturer has said to you, you need to reference. So what is referencing? Referencing is when you acknowledge other people's ideas, information, or quotes within your own work. I wrote this book. Me, I wrote it. Do you think it's okay that you just copy and paste? Or maybe you type, but you don't change the words. You're using my words. Just because you typed them, they're still mine. Do you think that's okay? How would you feel if you spent a year, I spent a year of my life. How would you feel if you spent a year writing a book for somebody else to just take bits of it and pass it off as their own? This is what's known as plagiarism. And it is absolutely not okay. The fact that you've read other people's work, whether you found that online, whether you found it in print, wherever you might have found it, that's great. Go you. Do your research, wonderful. But you must always acknowledge the author and give the author credit where credit is due. So that's where referencing comes in. But how do we reference? How do we do this? How do we give this credit? That's what I'm going to teach you now. Don't worry, I'm going to make it simple, speedy, and by the end of this video, you're going to get it all. So make sure you watch to the end. Otherwise, you're just going to make mistakes and you're not going to get the grades that you could get if you got it right. Stick around. We can do this. Throughout my academic life, both as a student and as a lecturer, I have always used the Harvard referencing system. So today, this is the one I'm going to teach you. Now, within the Harvard referencing system, there are two places that you must always reference. One is the citation in text. This will usually include the name or the author and the year. Two is in a reference list at the end of your piece of work. In the final reference list, you will have lots of details about the source that you have consulted in order to produce your work. So let me show you my biggest and hopefully my best, I should hope so, my best reference list that I've ever done. It's right here on my shelf in my office, pride place. This is my PhD. And in this pretty huge book, I had to reference all the way through. Now this reference list is 22 pages long. And this is a question I get a lot actually. How long should my reference list be? Well, the answer to that question is how long is a piece of string? It really depends on your work, how much of the content is taken from other people, how much is your own analysis. This all depends. So there's no easy answer to that question, but as a general rule of thumb, the more references, the better. Another question that I get asked a lot is, what's the difference between a reference list and a bibliography? A bibliography is when you haven't directly referred to that piece of writing or that source in the text. So a reference needs to be in two places, but a bibliography only needs to be in one. Okay, so let's get down to it. How do we actually do it? So your referencing will look slightly different depending on what type of source it is. So there's a set way to reference for books, a way for videos, a way for journal articles, a way for websites. Every different source has its own unique method of referencing. I know, sorry. I said I'd keep this simple. I'm really trying. Stay tuned. I promise it will make sense. So let's start off with a book, because this is probably something that you will reference the most often, I hope. When referencing a book, You start off by listing the author's or the editor's surname and initials. You then put the year of publication in brackets. You put the title of the book, including any subtitles, and that goes in italics. You then add in the edition number, if there is one. You include the place of publication, followed by a colon and the name of the publisher. Now I know this might sound a little bit complicated because if you are watching this video, it's probably new for you. And if you're finding this helpful so far, do me a favour, hit the like button. I know it might sound complicated right now, but it will get easier. I've been doing this for so many years, I know it all off the top of my head. And a piece of advice for you. Be careful using online referencing websites. They claim that you can put in a link or a title and it will do it all for you. I've found lots of mistakes when my students have done that. So it's up to you if you want to take that risk, I suppose. Now you'll notice the example I just gave you only included one author. So what do we do if there is more than one author who's written the book? Well, it's simple. You put the surname followed by the initial, you write the word and you put the second author's surname followed by their initial. Easy, right? That's only if there are two authors. What if there are more than two? Well, if there are more than two authors, we turn to Latin. Okay, don't be scared, don't be scared. Stay tuned, I will explain all. If there are more than two authors, you use the first person's name, surname and initial in the same way that you did before, followed by et al. And the et al should be in italics. Et al means and all in Latin. But I don't like reading books. I don't like going to the library. You were thinking that, weren't you? I bet you were. Fear not. In the modern day, lots of books are not physical anymore. They are online. That's great because it means you haven't got to trek into your library. You can access these texts online. And one of the great things that you can do, this is a bit of a sneaky one, you can still reference it as a physical book. Because who's gonna know? Who knows if you've actually picked up the book or if you've taken it from an e-library? Why would I do that, I hear you ask? Well, you're probably going to use lots of online sources for your assignment. And one of the things that makes a good reference list that gets the best marks is to have a range of sources. So if all of your sources come from the internet, your marks are going down. So try and have a variety, and just because you read the book online, it is still a book in print too. You can reference it as an actual book. So while we are talking about websites, I will move on and show you how to reference a website. A lot of valuable information is online these days, and that's brilliant. It's so easy to find. Some of the time, at least. And it's so easy. You do a quick Google search, boop, there it is, the answer. Some of the time, most of the time, it really depends on the topic, but it can be very easy. One quick tip I will give you before we move on is, if you haven't tried it yet, try Google Scholar. Never heard of it? You know how you can switch on Google from web to images, for example? Along with those other options of all the different types of search results that Google will provide you with, one option is Scholar. And this means that all content is scholarly. So it will come up with things like journal articles, academic papers, books, those sorts of things. Try it out. Anyway, you want to know how to reference a website. Okay, this is how you do it. Start off by listing the author. Now, you might not always know the author of a website. Let's take my website, for example. It's tourismteacher.com. Some people would reference it as Tourism Teacher, but actually they would be wrong. Because if you just click on the About button at the top, you will see that the author actually isn't named Tourism Teacher. The author is named Dr. Hayley Stainton. So actually it should be referenced Stainton, H. So I recommend when you are using a website, try to do a little bit of digging if you can. If you are on an organisation website like, for example, the United Nations, then in most cases, the United Nations will be the author. However, some pieces may have particular names attached to them, so check. Once you have identified the author of the website, you'll put their name, or his or her, them, the company. You'll then put the year of the publication, in brackets, the title of the document, in italics, you need to state that it's online, which usually goes in square brackets. You then need to include the URL link. So you will write available from, colon, and include the link. Then again in square brackets, you can put the date that it was accessed. One last note on websites that is really, really important for you to consider is, are they credible? By that, I mean, who wrote it? If it is the United Nations, that's pretty reliable, right? If it is Wikipedia, well, who actually wrote that? Anybody can write things and add them to Wikipedia. Not reliable, not good, won't get you the best marks. In fact, it might even get you marked down. Do not use Wikipedia. What about a YouTube video or a blog? Well, this is a bit of a grey area. Not so many years ago, these were an absolute no-no. But now there actually are a lot of credible people who are making videos and writing blogs. For example, there's a tourism professor that I followed for a long time called Drhayleystainton. He's renowned in the field of tourism research, and he has his own YouTube channel and his own blog. So you can't just rule out sources based on the fact that they are a type of source, because there are so many variations these days. So you need to make this judgment call yourself. Is Dr. Drhayleystainton's blog reliable? He's a tourism academic. I'd say yeah, probably. As long as you're writing about tourism, yeah. Is a random traveller who writes about their trips on their blog, are they reliable for your piece of work? Maybe not so much. So it's a judgment call that you need to make. The next thing that you might want to reference is a lecture or a presentation. Now, before we get started on how to do this, I would proceed with caution if you were going to just start referencing the person who taught you, who's probably also the person who's marking your work. Your teachers or lecturers, they want to see that you have gone out and done your research. They don't want you to just regurgitate what they already told you in class. So take what you've learned from them and do additional reading and additional research in that area. Now, if you really must reference your teacher or your lecturer, or if you've watched another presentation, perhaps at an event, perhaps online, then you can reference it, and this is how. As always, we start with the name of the lecturer or the presenter. This will be surname, comma, initial. As always, we then have the year in brackets. You should then include the title of the lecture or the presentation in italics. You then add, in square brackets, lecture or presentation, whichever it may be, so that everybody knows what type of source it is. If there is any additional information, for example a particular module or a course, then include that information there too. You should then list the name of the institution or the location. So for example, if it was at Buckingham College, you would state Buckingham College. You then need to include the date of the lecture or the presentation, which should be day followed by month. Another type of reference that I hope you will use, especially if you are in higher education, so if you are doing an undergraduate or a postgraduate degree, you absolutely should be reading academic work. So that's not only books and websites and lectures, but it's also journal articles. The reason journal articles are so great is because they're written by academics, usually, and they are peer reviewed. So what that means is, if I write a paper, I submit it for publication, it will be reviewed by at least 2 other academics who will decide, is it any good? Is it worth publishing? Now this gives your work extra credibility, and it means that journal articles are some of the most rigorous pieces of work that you can reference in your work. So extra brownie points for you if you're referencing journals. So how do we reference a journal? You start off with the name of the person who wrote the journal. So this could be 1 name, 2 names, 3 names, exactly the same way as a book. Surname, comma, initial. If it's 2 people, and surname, comma, initial. If it's more than 2 people, use et al. You then have the year, and you should have the title of the article. After the title of the article, you will include the name of the journal in italics. This should be followed then by any issue numbers and the page numbers. So now that you know how to reference, at the end of your work, in the text, it's just author year, so surname year or name of company and year, and your list at the end of your work should be in alphabetical order. It's a lot to take in, right? I know. But bear with me, we're almost there. I've got a few more tips that I will give you before we finish up. If you want to get the best grades in your reference list, make sure there are no mistakes. Make sure you follow the rules I've just taught you. Use as many references as you can. So let's say you want to make a statement and you know a lot of people have said this thing. For example, maybe I am writing a paper on the environmental impacts of aviation, and I want to say that aircraft pollution is a contributor to climate change. Has just one person said this? No. Loads of people have said this, right? So instead of just putting one reference in my text, why not use 3 or 4 or 5 or 6? The more, the merrier, the more, the better the grades. More is good. This is called cross-referencing. Cross-referencing can also take another form too. So the example I just gave you was where everybody agrees. I've listed, say, 5 people who all say aviation has contributed to climate change. But perhaps I've found 2 contradicting studies, and this is where you're really getting the top marks. Let's say I found 2 different studies, and Richard Branson believes that the future of aviation is in space, and I reference him, Branson 2021. However, Michael O'Leary claims that space travel will never take off, O'Leary 2021. This shows that I've done lots of reading. This shows that I know how to reference, but not only am I showing lots of reading, but I'm showing that I've comprehended it, and I've identified where authors say the same or different things. Do that, you'll be getting top marks. Promise. I get it, I totally get it, that referencing isn't necessarily the most fun thing in the world. But if you don't get better marks after watching this video, I'll eat my hat. Good luck with your assignment, let me know how you get on. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, hit that subscribe button and click like on this video too.